You're not really part of our Christmas tradition.
That's what Lisa said to me, my daughter-in-law, standing in my own kitchen, eyes glittering with something cold beneath that practiced sweetness, voice dripping with false concern as she delivered those words like a gift wrapped in poison. The audacity, the sheer breathtaking gall of it, still makes my blood simmer even now, months later, knowing what I know. But here's what she didn't count on. Grandmothers don't break as easily as she thought. We've survived worse than manipulative daughters-in-law with pretty faces and ugly intentions. And when we fight back, oh, sweetheart, we don't just win. We make sure you never forget what happens when you underestimate a woman who's been quietly watching, carefully documenting, strategically waiting for the perfect moment to dismantle your entire carefully constructed house of lies, brick by poisonous brick. I learned something important that Christmas. Betrayal doesn't always announce itself with a scream. Sometimes it arrives wearing a smile, so polite, so perfectly rehearsed, that you almost miss the knife sliding between your ribs. Let me tell you exactly how I did it. Before I continue, I want to say something to anyone who knows what it feels like to be silenced or erased in their own family. To those enduring emotional manipulation, gaslighting, or any form of abuse, your voice matters. Your truth deserves to be heard. If you're ready, share your story in the comments, even just a sentence. Or, if that feels too vulnerable, just tell us where you're from. Sometimes the first step toward reclaiming your dignity is simply saying, I'm here, I exist, I matter. You're not alone. Now, where was I? Yes, the beginning of the end of Lisa's reign of terror. It started innocently enough, the way the worst things often do. I'd been planning this Christmas for months, pouring my heart and my carefully saved money into creating something special. After losing my husband 2 years earlier, the holidays had felt hollow, echoing with absence. My son Michael, my only child, had grown distant, always busy, always promising next time for visits that never quite materialized. His wife Lisa had become the gatekeeper of our relationship, the interpreter of his time, the filter through which I was allowed access to my own son. So when I booked that beautiful chalet up in Winters Creek, a charming little resort town near Breckenridge, I saw it as more than just a vacation. It was an olive branch, a fresh start, a chance to gather my fractured family under one roof and remember what it felt like to belong to each other again. I'd spent weeks researching the perfect place, comparing prices, reading reviews. When I finally found it, a 3-bedroom chalet with a stone fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking snow-dusted pines, and enough space for everyone to feel comfortable, I felt something stir in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The deposit alone was substantial, but I didn't hesitate. Some things matter more than money. I told Michael about it during one of our brief phone calls. His voice brightened immediately. "Mom, that sounds amazing. Really thoughtful of you." For a moment, he sounded like my boy again. Warm, grateful, present. Then I heard Lisa's voice in the background, sharp and insistent. A muffled conversation followed. When Michael came back on the line, his tone had shifted, cautious, diplomatic. "Lisa wants to know if she can help plan the menu and activities. You know how she is about organization." I should have recognized the warning signs then, the way she was already inserting herself into the center of my gift. But I was too eager, too hopeful, too desperate for family harmony. "Of course," I said, swallowing my instinctive resistance. "Whatever makes everyone comfortable." That was my first mistake, choosing peace over boundaries. Lisa called me the next day. Her voice oozed with that sickeningly sweet concern she wielded like a weapon. "Erin, I've been thinking about the chalet trip. It's such a generous gesture, really, but I'm worried you might be overextending yourself financially. And honestly, Michael and I have our own Christmas traditions with my family that we really can't break. It might be better if you joined us instead. You understand, right? The implication was clear. Know your place. You're the guest now, not the host. Something cold settled in my stomach. But I forced myself to smile through the phone, to keep my voice light and unbothered. That's sweet of you to worry, Lisa, but everything's already arranged. I'm looking forward to it. Silence. Then, in a tone that could freeze antifreeze, you're not really part of our Christmas tradition. There it was, the mask slipping just enough to reveal the contempt underneath. I stood there, in my quiet kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't about Christmas. This was about territory, power, control. Lisa wanted me erased from the narrative of my own family, reduced to an inconvenient obligation, a duty visit, a check-the-box phone call on holidays. And in that moment, staring at the calendar on my refrigerator where I'd circled the dates for our trip in red marker, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to just endure this. Not this time. Not ever again. What I didn't know yet was just how far Lisa had already gone to ensure I stayed in my place. The betrayal waiting just around the corner would test everything I thought I knew about my son, my family, and myself. But it would also reveal exactly what I was capable of when pushed too far. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before our scheduled trip. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, still in my bathrobe, when my phone chimed. The subject line read, "Reservation cancellation confirmation, Winters Creek Resort." My hand froze halfway to my mouth. The coffee cup trembled, liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Cancellation? I hadn't canceled anything. My fingers fumbled with the phone screen, smudging it with moisture from the condensation on my cup. The email was brief, clinical, devastatingly matter-of-fact. "Dear Miss Morrison, this confirms your request to cancel reservation number 847392. Your deposit has been processed for refund according to our cancellation policy. Thank you for considering Winters Creek Resort." The words blurred. My chest constricted, that familiar tightness that had become my constant companion since my husband's death, the feeling of the world shifting beneath me without warning, without permission. I read it again, then again, searching for some mistake, some explanation that would make sense. There was none. My hands were shaking as I dialed the resort. The phone rang 4 times, each ring stretching out like an eternity, before a cheerful young woman answered with practiced hospitality. "Winters Creek Resort, this is Amber speaking. How may I create a memorable experience for you today?" The scripted greeting made my jaw clench. I forced myself to speak calmly, professionally, the voice I'd perfected during 40 years as an executive assistant, the voice that never betrayed emotion even when I was screaming inside. "This is Erin Morrison. I received an email about a cancellation I didn't make. There must be some mistake." A pause. The sound of keyboard clicking. Then Amber's voice returned. Slightly less cheerful, slightly more cautious. "Let me pull up your account, Miss Morrison. One moment, please." Elevator music filled my ear. Something instrumental and vaguely festive that made my stomach churn. I stood up, pacing my kitchen, counting the familiar cracks in the linoleum floor. 16 steps from the table to the sink. 16 steps back. "Miss Morrison, I'm showing here that the cancellation request came through our online portal yesterday at 2:47 p.m. It was processed from your account." My account. But I'd been at my book club yesterday afternoon, nowhere near a computer, nowhere near my phone except to silence it during our discussion. "That's impossible," I said, and my voice cracked despite my best efforts. "I was nowhere near a computer at that time, Someone else must have accessed my account. Another pause, this one longer, more uncomfortable. I could hear Amber conferring with someone in the background, voices muffled. When she came back, her tone had shifted to something mechanical, defensive, the voice of someone following a script designed to deflect liability. I understand your concern, Ms. Morrison, but our system shows the request originated from the email address on file. We sent a confirmation link, and it was clicked to verify the cancellation. Without evidence of unauthorized access, we have to assume the account holder made the request. Our cancellation policy is quite clear on this matter. Evidence. Of course they needed evidence. As if I could produce proof of something I didn't do. My mind raced. Who had access to my email? Who would do this? But even as I asked the question, I already knew the answer. It settled over me like ice water. Cold, clarifying, horrifying. Lisa. I'd given her my login information months ago when she offered to help me organize some family photos I'd uploaded to a cloud storage account. She'd been so helpful, so patient, walking me through the process of creating folders and sharing albums. I'd been grateful for her assistance, touched that she wanted to be involved in preserving our family memories. God, I'd been such a fool. Can you at least tell me what IP address the cancellation came from? I asked, grasping at straws. Amber's response was swift, final, unmovable. I'm sorry, Miss Morrison. We can't release that information. Privacy policy. But I'd be happy to help you rebook if you'd like, though our rates have increased for the holiday season, and availability is extremely limited now. Of course they had. Of course it was. I ended the call without rebooking. My hands were trembling so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. The coffee I'd been drinking earlier had gone cold. I stared at it, at the oily film forming on the surface, and felt something dark and bitter rising in my throat. Someone had deliberately sabotaged my Christmas. Someone had accessed my private accounts, impersonated me, stolen this moment I'd been planning and dreaming about for months. And the only person with both the means and the motive was my son's wife. I didn't confront her immediately. That's not how you deal with predators like Lisa. Creatures who've perfected the art of appearing innocent while sharpening their knives behind their backs. Instead, I called Michael. He answered on the fifth ring, distracted, slightly irritated at the interruption. Mom? Everything okay? I'm in the middle of something. Always in the middle of something. Never quite available. Never quite present. I explained the situation as calmly as I could manage. The unexpected cancellation, the timing, the impossibility of it being my doing. I didn't mention Lisa's name. I wanted to see if he'd arrive at that conclusion himself. He didn't. Instead, after a long, painful silence, he asked in a voice so gentle it felt like a slap, Mom, are you sure you didn't cancel it and just forget? You've been under a lot of stress since Dad died. It would be understandable if... The rest of his words dissolved into white noise. My own son, my only child. The boy I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved with every fiber of my being, he thought I was losing my mind. Or worse, he was pretending to think that because it was easier than confronting the truth about his wife. When I could finally speak, my voice sounded distant, hollow, barely recognizable. I didn't forget, Michael. Okay, he said, in that patronizing tone people use with elderly relatives they've already stopped taking seriously. Okay, Mom, we'll figure it out. Don't worry about the trip. We'll do something else. Something simpler. Lisa and I will handle the planning this year. You just relax. You just disappear. You just accept your diminished role and stop making trouble. I hung up without saying goodbye, and in the silence that followed, Sitting alone in my kitchen with cold coffee and the wreckage of my Christmas plans scattered around me, I felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. This wasn't just about a canceled reservation anymore. This was war. And Lisa had just made the fatal mistake of underestimating exactly who she was dealing with. I might be 68 years old. I might be widowed, dismissed, and discarded, but I'd spent 4 decades managing executives, anticipating problems, documenting everything, and solving crises with nothing but determination and meticulous attention to detail. Lisa wanted to play games? Fine. Let's see how she liked playing against someone who'd been quietly perfecting her skills long before Lisa was even born. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I titled it simply, Evidence.
The thing about being underestimated is that it gives you room to maneuver. People assume that because you're older, widowed, retired, you've somehow lost your edge. They think your sharpest years are behind you, that technology has passed you by, that you're too fragile or too confused to fight back effectively. Lisa had made that assumption about me. It was going to cost her everything. I started small, methodical, the way I'd always worked. First, I needed to confirm my suspicions with concrete proof, not just the gut feeling that was burning holes in my stomach, but documentation that would stand up under scrutiny. I called the resort again the next morning. This time I asked for a manager. When he came on the line, I used my most professional voice, the one that had intimidated junior executives for decades, and explained that I suspected fraudulent access to my account. His name was David. He sounded young, uncertain, clearly uncomfortable with potential liability issues. "I understand your concern, Miss Morrison," he said carefully, "but as I'm sure our representative explained, the cancellation came from your verified email address." "I'm aware," I replied crisply, "which is why I need to know the IP address the request originated from. I'm willing to file a police report if necessary, but I'd prefer to handle this directly with your security team first." The mention of police shifted something in his tone. Suddenly, he was more cooperative, more willing to dig into the details. "Let me pull up the technical logs. Give me just a moment." I waited, pen poised over my notepad. Yes, I still use paper and pen, and no, I don't apologize for it. Ready to document everything. When David came back, his voice carried a note of surprise. "That's interesting. The cancellation request did come from your email address, but the IP address shows it originated from a location in Boulder. Is that anywhere near you?" Boulder. 40 minutes from my house in suburban Denver, but exactly where Lisa and Michael lived. My hand tightened around the pen until my knuckles went white. "No," I said quietly. "I'm in Denver. I was nowhere near Boulder that day." "Then you may indeed have a case for fraudulent access," David admitted reluctantly. "I can't give you the full IP address over the phone for privacy reasons, but I can confirm it wasn't from your usual location. Our system shows your previous logins all came from Denver area addresses." "Gotcha." I thanked him and hung up, then immediately added this information to my evidence folder. Date, time, David's name, the Boulder location. Everything documented, everything recorded. But I needed more than just circumstantial geography. I needed motive, pattern, proof of intent.
The next piece fell into my lap 2 days later during my usual Thursday afternoon walk around the neighborhood. I'd lived in this quiet Denver suburb for 32 years. I knew every family, every dog, every quirk of every house on my street. My neighbors weren't just faces. They were witnesses to my entire adult life. Harold and Mary Atlee lived 3 houses down, both in their late 70s, married for 54 years, the kind of steady, dependable presence that makes a neighborhood feel like home. I was passing their house when Mary appeared on her front porch, waving with unusual urgency. Aaron, dear, do you have a minute?" something in her voice made me stop immediately. She looked distressed, her normally cheerful face pinched with concern. "Of course," I said, climbing their porch steps carefully. The wood creaked under my weight, a familiar, comforting sound. Mary glanced around, as if checking for eavesdroppers, then gestured me inside with a conspiratorial whisper. "I need to talk to you about something. It's been bothering me ever since Harold mentioned you were planning that family trip." Inside, their living room smelled of lemon furniture polish and the faint medicinal scent of arthritis cream. Harold sat in his recliner, looking equally troubled. Mary offered me tea. I accepted, more to give her hands something to do than because I wanted it. She was nervous. Her fingers trembled slightly as she poured from the floral teapot they'd received as a wedding gift decades ago. When we were settled, Mary exchanged a long look with Harold. He nodded slowly, giving permission for something unspoken. "This is difficult to talk about," Mary began haltingly, "but Harold and I have been discussing it, and we think you should know. About 3 years ago, we had a similar situation with Lisa." My spine straightened. Every nerve in my body went on high alert. "What kind of situation?" I asked carefully. Harold cleared his throat, his weathered voice rough with old anger. "Our grandson was getting married in Napa Valley. Beautiful destination wedding. We'd saved for years to afford it. The trip, the hotel, gifts. We booked everything through this fancy travel service that Lisa recommended. She said she had used them before, that they were reliable and gave great discounts."
Mary picked up the thread, her hands twisting her napkin into tight spirals. 2 weeks before the wedding, we got a call saying our reservations had been canceled. Just like that. No explanation. When we called the travel service, they claimed we'd requested the cancellation ourselves. But we hadn't. We'd never even logged into their system. The parallels made my skin prickle with goosebumps, despite the warm room. "Did you ever find out what happened?" I asked, though I already knew the answer forming in my gut. Harold's jaw tightened, decades of suppressed frustrations surfacing in his expression. "We suspected Lisa had something to do with it. She'd asked us for our login information to check on some upgrade options for us. Being trusting old fools, we gave it to her. When the cancellation happened, she acted shocked and sympathetic, helped us rebook everything at the last minute, through her cousin's travel agency, at nearly double the price. We paid it because what choice did we have? It was our grandson's wedding. But afterward, we started noticing things. Lisa's cousin gave her a referral bonus for our booking, and later we heard through the grapevine that Lisa had used our original reservation dates and discount code to book a romantic getaway for herself and Michael." The room felt suddenly airless. My teacup rattled against the saucer as I set it down with shaking hands. "Did you confront her?" I managed to ask. Harold shook his head heavily. "We mentioned it to Michael once. He got defensive immediately, said we were being paranoid, that Lisa would never do something like that. He made us feel crazy for even suggesting it. After that, we decided it wasn't worth losing our relationship with him over it. We let it go." But they hadn't really let it go. The pain was still fresh in their voices, still raw in their eyes. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, though I already knew. Mary reached across and squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Because when Harold mentioned your Christmas trip last week, and then we heard it got canceled under mysterious circumstances, we recognized the pattern, and we realized we should have spoken up years ago. Maybe if we had, she wouldn't have dared try it again." The guilt in her voice broke something open in my chest. "This isn't your fault," I said firmly. "But this information, it changes everything. Would you be willing to write down what you just told me? Dates, details, everything you remember?" They both nodded without hesitation. As I walked home 20 minutes later, with their handwritten testimony carefully folded in my pocket, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't just my story anymore. Lisa had done this before. She had a pattern, a method, a history of exploitation hidden beneath that polished, charming exterior. And suddenly,
I wasn't just fighting for my own dignity. I was fighting to expose a predator before she could do this to someone else. But when I got home and opened my laptop to add the Atlee statement to my evidence folder, my blood turned to ice. The folder was empty. Every file, every screenshot, every carefully documented piece of evidence I'd been building, gone. And in its place, a single new file titled with chilling simplicity, "Nice try." Someone had accessed my computer. Someone wanted me to know they were watching, and that someone was already 10 steps ahead of me.
I stared at that file, "Nice try," for a full minute before my brain could process what I was seeing. My hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling, not from fear, from rage so pure and white-hot it made my vision shimmer at the edges. She'd been in my computer, in my private files, watching me build my case against her, then casually destroying it like swatting a fly. The violation of it made my skin crawl. I clicked on the file with a hand that shook, despite my best efforts to steady it. Inside was a single line of text, mockingly cheerful. "Maybe you really are losing your memory, Aaron." That smiley face, that casual cruelty wrapped in digital punctuation. I wanted to scream, to throw the laptop across the room, to call Michael right that second and demand he see what his wife truly was. But I didn't. Because that's exactly what Lisa wanted, for me to react emotionally, hysterically, like an unhinged old woman losing her grip on reality. It would only confirm the narrative she was already building. Poor, confused Aaron, unable to cope with aging and loss, lashing out at the daughter-in-law trying so hard to help. Instead, I closed the laptop with deliberate calm. Then, I went to my bedroom closet, moved aside 3 storage boxes of my husband's old clothes I still couldn't bear to donate, and pulled out the fireproof safe I'd installed years ago. Inside was my insurance policy, an external hard drive I'd been using to back up family photos. I'd created a backup of my evidence folder there just 2 days earlier, before I even knew I'd need it. Old habits from 40 years of administrative work: always have a backup, always assume disaster could strike, always protect the important files. Lisa thought she'd outmaneuvered me. She thought destroying my digital evidence would send me into panicked retreat. She had no idea who she was dealing with. But I needed more than just restored files. I needed allies, witnesses, people who would stand beside me when the moment of truth arrived. The Atlees had given me their testimony, but they were elderly, easily dismissed as forgetful or confused. I needed someone younger, sharper, someone whose credibility couldn't be questioned. That's when I thought of Jamie. Jamie Chen had worked as the resort concierge at Winters Creek for 6 years. I'd spoken with her multiple times during the booking process. She'd been helpful, professional, genuinely kind. During one of our conversations, she'd mentioned recognizing my last name because her mother had worked with a Morrison at a law firm in Denver. Years ago. Small world. Smaller than Lisa realized. I called the resort again, this time asking specifically for Jamie. When she answered, her voice carried that same warm professionalism I remembered. "Winters Creek Resort, this is Jamie. How can I help you today?" "Jamie, this is Aaron Morrison. We spoke several times about my reservation that was recently canceled. Do you have a moment to talk privately?" A pause. Then her voice shifted, becoming quieter, more guarded. "Miss Morrison, yes, I remember you. I was actually surprised when I saw the cancellation come through. You seemed so excited about the trip." "I was, which is why I never canceled it. Someone accessed my account fraudulently. I'm gathering evidence, and I was hoping you might be willing to help me." Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her breathing, weighing her options, calculating the risk. "I could lose my job for sharing client information," she finally said,
her words measured and cautious. "I'm not asking you to share anything that would put you at risk," I replied gently. "I just need to know if anyone contacted the resort pretending to be me, or if there's any record of unusual activity on my account."
Silence stretched between us. I counted my own heartbeats. 10, 15, 20. Then Jamie's voice came back, barely above a whisper, tight with suppressed anger. "There was something strange. About a week before your cancellation, a woman called claiming to be you. She said she needed to update the payment method and ask detailed questions about the cancellation policy. I thought it was odd because you'd already provided all that information. Her voice sounded younger than yours, but she knew enough details that I assumed it was legitimate." My pulse quickened. Every nerve ending fired with vindication. "Do you remember anything specific about the call?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. She asked specifically about whether cancellations could be processed remotely and whether we'd contact you directly to confirm. She seemed very focused on the verification process. At the time, I just thought you were being thorough. But now... Jamie trailed off meaningfully. "Now it looks like she was mapping out how to impersonate me without getting caught," I finished grimly. "Ms. Morrison, I shouldn't be telling you this, but..." Jamie's voice dropped even lower, barely audible. "That call came from a Boulder area code. And the woman used a specific phrase that stuck with me. She called you my mother-in-law when asking about adding additional guests. At the time, I thought it was sweet that your daughter-in-law was helping you plan, but if she was actually impersonating you..." The pieces clicked together with devastating clarity. Lisa had called pretending to be me, had gathered information about the cancellation process, had tested the security protocols. Then she used my login credentials to execute the cancellation herself, making sure every digital trail pointed back to me. It wasn't just opportunistic fraud. It was premeditated, calculated, sophisticated. Jamie, would you be willing to document this conversation, even just notes for your own records, in case I need corroboration later? A long exhale followed by quiet determination in her voice. My mother went through something similar with her mother-in-law. Financial abuse disguised as family helping family. It took her years to untangle. So yes, Ms. Morrison, I'll document everything. And if you need me to testify or provide official statements, you let me know. Relief flooded through me so intensely my knees went weak. I sat down heavily on my kitchen chair, gripping the phone like a lifeline. "Thank you," I managed, my voice rough with emotion. "You have no idea what this means." "I think I do," Jamie said softly. "Good luck. And, Ms. Morrison, don't let her win."
After I hung up, I sat in the gathering December darkness of my kitchen, not bothering to turn on the lights. I had my backup files, I had the Atlee's testimony, I had Jamie's corroboration from inside the resort. The evidence was building, the net was tightening. But I still needed one more piece, something so undeniable, so publicly devastating, that even Michael couldn't explain it away or rationalize it as misunderstanding. I needed to catch Lisa in the act, on record, in her own words. And I had exactly 1 week to do it, because Michael had just sent me a text inviting me to Christmas Eve dinner at their house. Lisa's territory, her stage, her carefully controlled environment where she'd spent years perfecting her performance. But this time, I'd be walking in with my own script and a recording device hidden in my purse. What I didn't know yet was that Lisa had her own plan for Christmas Eve, one that would force me to make a choice between my dignity and my relationship with my son, one that would push me to the absolute breaking point. But it would also hand me the weapon I needed to destroy her completely.
Christmas Eve arrived cold and bright, the kind of Colorado winter day that makes everything look deceptively perfect. Crisp snow, brilliant sky, the world scrubbed clean and innocent. I knew better. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, fastening the clasp on my late husband's watch. I'd worn it every day since he died, the weight of it on my wrist a constant reminder that I'd survived worse things than manipulative daughters-in-law. The small digital recorder was tucked inside my purse, tested 3 times that morning to ensure it worked. Voice activated, 6 hours of battery life, crystal clear audio quality. My hands were steady as I applied lipstick, a deep berry shade my husband had always loved. War paint, I thought with grim satisfaction. Lisa wanted a performance tonight? Fine, she'd get one, just not the one she was expecting. Michael and Lisa's house sat in one of Boulder's upscale neighborhoods, all tasteful gray siding and dramatic angular windows designed to capture mountain views. The kind of place that screamed, "We've made it," without saying a word. I parked on the street and sat for a moment, watching warm lights spill from their windows. Inside, I could see movement. Lisa arranging something on the dining table, Michael carrying wine glasses, everything perfectly choreographed for maximum holiday charm. My phone buzzed. A text from Mary Atlee. "You've got this. We're thinking of you." I typed back quickly. "Thank you. I'll tell you everything tomorrow." Then I grabbed my purse, checked one more time that the recorder was running, and walked up their pristine, snow-dusted walkway. Lisa answered the door before I could even knock. She wore a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, her hair styled in loose waves, her smile bright and welcoming and absolutely poisonous. "Erin, Merry Christmas!" she sang out, leaning in for a hug that felt like embracing a mannequin, all surface, no warmth. She smelled of expensive perfume and something cloying underneath, like fruit left too long in the sun. "Merry Christmas, Lisa," I replied evenly, returning the hug with exactly the same hollow enthusiasm.
Michael appeared behind her, genuinely pleased to see me. My heart twisted. Whatever else was true, my son still loved me. He'd just been blinded by the woman standing between us. "Mom, come in, it's freezing out there." He took my coat, his hands gentle, his eyes concerned. "How are you doing? I know this season's been hard without Dad." The kindness in his voice nearly broke my resolve, but I held firm. "I'm managing," I said softly. "Some days are harder than others." Lisa's hand found Michael's arm with practiced ease, her fingers curling possessively around his elbow. "We're so glad you could join us," she said with syrupy sincerity. "I know our little traditions might be different from what you're used to, but we want you to feel included." The subtle emphasis on our and included, as if my presence was a charitable concession rather than a son inviting his mother for Christmas. I smiled blandly and said nothing. The house smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon, everything meticulously decorated in whites and silvers, not a single element out of place. It felt more like a staged showroom than a home where people actually lived. Lisa had invited her parents and her sister's family, 8 people total, all seated around an elegantly set table that made my modest suburban dining room look pathetic by comparison. I was seated at the far end, away from Michael, flanked by Lisa's father and her nephew, a sullen teenager who spent the entire meal staring at his phone. Deliberate positioning, maximum isolation. Lisa held court from the opposite end, regaling everyone with stories, laughing at exactly the right moments, playing the perfect hostess with flawless precision. And then, halfway through dinner, she made her move.
The conversation had turned to holiday plans. Lisa's sister was describing their upcoming ski trip when Lisa suddenly turned to me with a look of tender concern that made my stomach clench. "Erin, I've been meaning to ask you, how are you really doing? Michael mentioned you've been having some memory issues lately. Nothing serious, I'm sure, just normal aging things. But we worry about you living alone." The table went quiet. Every eye turned toward me. Memory issues. Casually dropped into conversation like a hand grenade disguised as compassion? Michael looked uncomfortable but didn't contradict her.
I set down my fork carefully, buying myself a moment to breathe through the rage rising in my chest. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said mildly. "My memory is perfectly fine." Lisa's smile never wavered, but her eyes glittered with something sharp and triumphant. "Oh, I know it must be hard to admit, but Michael told me about the confusion with the resort reservation. And didn't you misplace your car keys twice last month? It's nothing to be ashamed of, truly. My grandmother went through the same thing. Eventually, we had to move her into assisted living for her own safety." Assisted living. She was planting seeds, building a narrative, preparing everyone at this table to believe I was incompetent, unreliable, incapable of managing my own life. I felt the recorder in my purse like a burning coal. "Keep talking, Lisa, keep digging." "The resort reservation wasn't confusion," I said clearly, making sure my voice carried to everyone present. "It was fraudulent cancellation. Someone accessed my account without permission." Lisa's expression shifted to practice sympathy, her head tilting in that patronizing way that made my blood boil. "I know you believe that, sweetie, but the resort confirmed the request came from your email. Sometimes as we age, we do things and don't remember doing them. It's very common. Nothing to be embarrassed about." Sweetie. She called me sweetie at her own dinner table in front of her entire family. Michael shifted uncomfortably, caught between his wife and his mother, choosing silence, which meant choosing her. "I've also noticed you seem fixated on me lately. Michael said you've been asking the neighbors questions about me, about some vacation from years ago. I'm worried this might be more than simple forgetfulness. Sometimes confusion can manifest as paranoia or suspicion toward loved ones."
There it was, the trap sprung in full view. She'd positioned me perfectly. If I defended myself, I'd sound defensive, paranoid, exactly what she was accusing me of. If I stayed silent, I'd confirm her narrative through my passivity. Every person at that table was watching me with varying degrees of pity and discomfort. Lisa's sister murmured something sympathetic. Her mother reached over to pat Lisa's hand consolingly, as if Lisa was the victim here. And Michael, my son, my only child, looked at me with such gentle, heartbroken concern that I knew he'd already accepted Lisa's version of reality. I was losing him. Right there, at that table, in real time, I could feel the last threads of our relationship fraying under the weight of his wife's carefully constructed lies. The room felt suddenly airless. My chest tightened, my vision blurred at the edges. For one terrible moment, I considered standing up and walking out, just leaving, letting them all believe whatever they wanted, accepting my exile with whatever dignity I had left. But then I felt the weight of my husband's watch on my wrist. I thought of Harold and Mary, who'd stayed silent for years and regretted it. I thought of Jamie at the resort, documenting everything because her mother hadn't been brave enough to fight back. And I realized this moment, right here, was exactly why I'd come. To see what Lisa would do when she thought she'd won. To let her reveal herself completely. To collect the evidence I needed. So, instead of leaving, I did something that clearly surprised everyone at the table. I smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a defeated smile. A smile that promised consequences. "You're absolutely right, Lisa," I said quietly, my voice steady as steel. "We should definitely talk about memory and truth. In fact, I think it's time we had a very honest conversation about what really happened with that resort reservation and several other interesting incidents from your past." Lisa's expression flickered, just for a second, with something raw and panicked before the mask slammed back into place. But I'd seen it. And so had Michael. The question was, would he finally choose to see it too?
The silence that followed my words was absolute. You could have heard a snowflake land on the windowsill. The clinking of silverware stopped, the murmur of polite conversation died. Even Lisa's nephew looked up from his phone, sensing the sudden shift in atmospheric pressure. Lisa recovered first, her laugh light and dismissive, perfectly calibrated to sound amused rather than threatened. "Aaron, I think maybe we should talk about this privately. You seem upset, and I don't want you to say something you'll regret in front of everyone." The concern in her voice was masterful, just the right blend of compassion and condescension. She was already framing whatever I said next as the ramblings of an unstable woman having an episode. But I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment. I wasn't about to be managed or redirected. "No, Lisa, I think this conversation needs to happen right here, right now, with witnesses." I kept my voice calm, reasonable, utterly collected. "Because you've spent this entire evening questioning my memory and competence, so let's test yours instead." Michael leaned forward, his face creased with confusion and growing alarm. "Mom, what are you talking about? What's going on?" I turned to him, my son, and spoke directly to the part of him that I prayed still existed beneath years of Lisa's careful conditioning. 3 years ago, did Lisa ever mention helping Harold and Mary Atlee with travel arrangements for their grandson's wedding? The question clearly blindsided him. He blinked, thrown by the apparent non sequitur. I don't remember. Maybe? Why does that matter? Because they booked their trip through a service Lisa recommended, and 2 weeks before the wedding, their reservation was mysteriously canceled. They had to rebook everything at the last minute through Lisa's cousin's agency at nearly double the price. Does any of that sound familiar? Lisa's face had gone very still, her smile frozen in place like something carved from ice. "That was a terrible misunderstanding," she said quickly, her words tumbling out just a bit too fast. "A computer glitch with the original booking system. I felt horrible about it and tried to help them salvage the situation." "By collecting a referral bonus from your cousin for the emergency rebooking?" I asked quietly.
The color drained from Lisa's face. Michael's head swiveled between us, confusion deepening into something that looked almost like recognition, as if pieces were beginning to click together in his mind. "Mom, how do you even know about—" "Because Harold and Mary told me themselves last week, Michael. They've carried that suspicion for 3 years, Michael. But they never said anything because you got defensive when they tried to bring it up. They chose to stay silent rather than lose their relationship with you." I watched that land, watched Michael's expression shift from confusion to discomfort to something harder to define. Lisa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a screech that made everyone flinch. "This is ridiculous. You're twisting an innocent situation into some conspiracy theory because you can't accept that sometimes things just go wrong. This is exactly what I was talking about, paranoid fixation." Her voice had risen, losing some of its practiced smoothness. The mask was slipping. "Then explain the phone call," I said calmly. "What phone call?" Lisa snapped, her composure cracking further. "The one you made to Winters Creek Resort a week before my reservation was canceled. The one where you pretended to be me and asked detailed questions about their cancellation policy and verification process." The room went absolutely silent. Lisa's mouth opened, closed. Her eyes darted to Michael, calculating, recalibrating her strategy on the fly. That's insane. Why would I do that?" "That's an excellent question," I agreed. "The resort concierge remembers the call very clearly. She remembers the Boulder area code. She even remembers that the caller referred to me as my mother-in-law while supposedly being me. Interesting slip, don't you think?" Michael had gone very pale. He was staring at Lisa now with an expression I'd never seen before. Doubt, raw and undisguised. "Lisa," he said slowly, his voice strained and uncertain, "tell me you didn't do this."
And here's where Lisa made her fatal mistake. Instead of denying it calmly, instead of maintaining her composure and spinning another plausible explanation, she lashed out. "Oh, so now you're believing her over me?" she hissed, her carefully constructed warmth evaporating like water on hot pavement. Your mother, who's been impossible and demanding since the day we got married, who's never accepted me, never respected our boundaries, never stopped trying to control you? The venom in her voice shocked everyone at the table. Her own parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. Her sister looked away. But Lisa wasn't finished. She'd held this in for years, and now it came pouring out in a torrent of bitter accusation. She's manipulative, Michael. She uses guilt and obligation to keep you tethered to her. That whole chalet thing was just another way to force herself into the center of our lives, to make everything about her. So yes, I canceled it, because we deserve one Christmas, just one, where we're not performing for her approval. The admission hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then Michael stood slowly, his face a battlefield of emotions, shock, betrayal, anger, grief, all warring for dominance. You actually did it? He whispered, his voice breaking. You canceled Mom's reservation, you went into her account and... To protect us, Lisa insisted desperately, reaching for him. To protect our marriage, our happiness. She was going to ruin everything like she always does. Michael stepped back from her touch like she'd burned him. She spent her savings on that trip, he said, his words slow and heavy, as if each one weighed 1,000 pounds. She planned it for months. She just wanted to spend Christmas with her family. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. Not tears of vindication or triumph, tears of grief for all the years we'd lost to Lisa's manipulation, tears of relief that my son was finally seeing the truth. Lisa looked around the table wildly, searching for allies, finding none. Her own family sat frozen, horrified witnesses to her complete unmasking. You're all going to believe this? Her twisted version where I'm some villain? I was trying to help. She's old and confused and... Stop. Michael's voice cut through her spiraling defense like a blade. Just stop, Lisa. Please. The please broke something in the room. It wasn't angry. It was exhausted, defeated. The sound of a man realizing his marriage was built on lies. Lisa's face crumpled. Real tears now, not calculated ones. Tears of genuine panic as she watched everything she'd built collapsing around her. Michael, please, let me explain. It's not what it looks like. I can fix this. We can... I need you to leave, Michael said quietly. Mom, I need you to go. I need to think about this. The words hit me like a physical blow. After everything, after the truth finally coming out, he was still asking me to leave.
I stood on shaking legs, gathering my purse with numb fingers. Lisa was sobbing openly now, her perfect facade shattered beyond repair. As I walked toward the door, Michael followed me. At the threshold, he caught my arm gently. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice thick with tears. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have believed you. I should have seen it. I need time to process this. Please. I cupped his face with one hand, my heart breaking for the confusion and pain written across his features. Take all the time you need, I said softly. I'll be here when you're ready. I drove home through dark, snow-lined streets, my hands shaking on the wheel, tears blurring the traffic lights into watercolor smears. I'd won. The truth was out. Lisa's mask had shattered in front of witnesses. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. When I got home, I found my front door slightly ajar. I never left it unlocked. And inside, the house had been ransacked, drawers emptied, papers scattered, my office completely destroyed. On my desk, another message written in lipstick across my monitor. You took everything from me, Now I'm taking everything from you. Lisa wasn't done fighting, and neither was I.
I stood in my doorway, staring at the wreckage of my home, and felt something inside me go completely, utterly cold. Not the heat of anger, not the sharp sting of violation. Cold, Arctic. The kind of calm that comes when you've been pushed past fear into a place where only calculation exists. Lisa had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Breaking into my home, destroying my belongings, leaving threats scrawled in lipstick like some unhinged villain from a bad movie. She'd made this personal, criminal, undeniable, and she just handed me everything I needed to finish this. I didn't touch anything. Instead, I pulled out my phone with steady hands and dialed 911. The police arrived within 15 minutes. 2 officers, one older with gray threading through his dark hair, one younger who looked barely out of the academy. I met them on my front porch, my voice calm and factual as I explained the situation. Break-in, vandalism, threatening message. I showed them the lipstick scrawl on my monitor, careful not to touch anything, preserving the evidence. The older officer, Sergeant Davies, took photos while his partner dusted for fingerprints. Their faces were professionally neutral, but I caught the exchange of glances, the unspoken communication between partners who'd seen this kind of domestic drama before. "Do you have any idea who might have done this, ma'am?" Davies asked, his pen poised over his notepad. I could have played coy, could have pretended uncertainty, but I was done with games. "My daughter-in-law, Lisa Morrison," I said clearly. "Earlier tonight, I confronted her about fraudulent activity involving a resort reservation. She confessed in front of multiple witnesses. She was extremely upset when I left. This message," I gestured to the screen, "references me taking everything from her, which directly connects to tonight's confrontation." Davies wrote it all down, his expression carefully blank. "We'll need to speak with her. Do you have her contact information?" I provided it without hesitation. Address, phone number, everything they needed. As they documented the scene, I walked through my ransacked house with my phone camera, recording everything. Empty drawers, scattered papers, the deliberate, vengeful destruction of someone who'd lost control completely. My external hard drive, the one with all my backup evidence, was gone. Lisa had torn apart my office searching for it. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that I'd already uploaded everything to a secure cloud storage service 3 days earlier. Old administrative habits. Always have a backup for your backup.
It was nearly midnight when the police finally left. They'd collected evidence, taken my statement, promised to follow up. Whether they actually would remained to be seen. Domestic situations between in-laws rarely topped anyone's priority list. But I had the report, the documentation, the official record. One more piece of evidence in the case I was building. I was sweeping up broken picture frames, including my wedding photo, glass shattered across my husband's smiling face, when my phone rang. "Michael." My hand trembled as I answered. "Mom." His voice was raw, scraped hollow by crying. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I just got a call from the Boulder police. They said Lisa broke into your house. Is that true? Are you okay?" I sank into my kitchen chair, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. "I'm fine. Shaken, but fine. The house is a mess, but nothing that can't be fixed. I can't believe—" His voice broke. "I married her. I defended her. I chose her over you for years, and she—" "Michael, stop!" I gentled my voice, even though my own heart was splintering. "This isn't your fault." "It is, though," he insisted bitterly. "I saw the signs. I ignored them. Every time you tried to tell me something was wrong, I made excuses for her. I let her isolate you. I became her accomplice without even realizing it." The grief in his voice was so profound I could barely breathe through it.
"Where is she now?" I asked quietly. "I don't know. She left after you did. Took her car and just vanished. She's not answering her phone. Her parents haven't heard from her. I'm worried she might do something stupid." Part of me, the part that was still angry, still violated, thought that whatever Lisa did was her own responsibility. But the mother in me, the part that still loved my son despite everything, knew he needed reassurance. "The police will find her," I said. "And Michael, whatever happens next, you need to understand something. Lisa made her own choices. You're not responsible for her actions. You're only responsible for what you do moving forward." Silence. Then a shaky breath. "I want to fix this, Mom. I want to make it right, but I don't even know where to start." "You start by being honest about everything. With yourself, with me, with whoever needs to hear it. Truth is the only foundation worth building on." We talked for another 20 minutes. Him apologizing repeatedly, me reassuring him, both of us navigating the wreckage of years of manipulation and lies. When we finally hung up, I sat alone in my devastated kitchen and let myself cry. Not delicate tears, deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place I'd kept locked away for too long. For my husband, gone too soon. For my son, lost to me for years. For myself, diminished and dismissed and nearly erased. But also, somehow, tears of relief. Because the truth was finally out. The mask was shattered, the lies were exposed. Whatever came next, it would be built on reality, not illusion. Christmas morning arrived cold and bright. I woke early, stiff from sleeping poorly on my couch, surrounded by the chaos Lisa had created. My body ached. My eyes were swollen from crying. My house looked like a crime scene. But when I checked my phone, there was a text from Mary Atlee. "Coming over at 9 with breakfast and cleaning supplies. No arguments." And another from Jamie at the resort. "Heard what happened. My statement is ready whenever you need it. Stay strong." And one from Michael. "Can I come over? I want to help clean up. Please." I sat there in the gray morning light surrounded by brokenness and felt something unexpected bloom in my chest. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope I'd carried for years, the hope that if I just stayed quiet enough, accommodating enough, invisible enough, I might earn my place in my own family. Real hope. Solid hope. The kind built on people who showed up, who believed me, who stood beside me when everything fell apart.
I was texting Michael back, "Yes, please come," when I heard a car pull up outside. Through my front window, I saw a police cruiser. Sergeant Davies stepped out, along with the detective I didn't recognize. Their faces were grim. My stomach dropped. They walked up my front path with the heavy deliberation of people carrying bad news. I opened the door before they could knock. "Ms. Morrison," Davies said carefully, "we need to talk to you about Lisa Morrison. There's been a development." The way he said development made my blood run cold. "What kind of development?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The detective stepped forward, her expression professionally sympathetic. "Last night around 2 a.m., Lisa Morrison attempted to access Winters Creek Resort, claiming to be you. She tried to use your identification and credit card to book a last-minute reservation. When the night clerk became suspicious and called to verify, she fled the scene. We have her on security footage." Relief and confusion warred in my chest. "So you can arrest her for identity theft?" "That's not all," Davies said heavily. "We ran a deeper background check. Lisa Morrison has a history of this: identity fraud, booking scams, financial manipulation. She's wanted in 2 other states under different names. Your case broke open something much bigger." The world tilted sideways. Different names, multiple states. This wasn't just a vindictive daughter-in-law. This was a career criminal who targeted my family. "Does Michael know?" I managed to ask. The detective's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "Not yet. We wanted to inform you first, since you're the primary victim in this jurisdiction. But Ms. Morrison, there's something else you should know." She pulled out a folder, opened it carefully. Inside were photos, documents, evidence of a web of deception so vast and calculated, it took my breath away.
We believe Lisa targeted your son specifically because of his financial stability and your vulnerability as a widow. This wasn't random. It was strategic. My knees buckled. Davies caught my elbow, steadying me. Everything, the entire relationship, the marriage, years of carefully constructed connection, had been a con from the very beginning, and my son had no idea he'd been the mark all along.
I had to be the one to tell him, not the police, not strangers delivering clinical facts about fraud and deception. Me, his mother, the person who'd brought him into this world and would stand beside him as his world collapsed. The detectives understood. They gave me 2 hours before they'd make official contact. I called Michael and asked him to come alone. He arrived 20 minutes later, his face haggard from a sleepless night. He'd aged years in a single evening, new lines carved around his eyes, gray showing at his temples that I'd never noticed before. When he saw the police folder sitting on my kitchen table, he went pale. "Mom, what's going on?" I guided him to a chair, my hands steady on his shoulder despite the trembling in my own chest. "Sit down, sweetheart. There's something you need to know about Lisa, something the police discovered." I watched his face as I walked him through it, the multiple identities, the history of fraud across state lines, the calculated targeting of vulnerable families. Each revelation hit him like a physical blow. When I finished, he sat frozen, staring at nothing, his breathing shallow and labored. "She never loved me," he finally whispered, his voice so broken that it shattered what was left of my heart. Everything, our entire marriage, was a lie from the beginning. I knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in mine. They were ice cold. "I know," I said softly. "I'm so sorry."
You tried to tell me. Tears spilled down his cheeks unchecked. Not explicitly, but you saw something was wrong. You kept trying to connect with me, and I shut you out. I chose her over you every single time. Michael, listen to me. I squeezed his hands harder. This is not your fault. She was a professional. This is what she does. You couldn't have known. But you sensed it, he insisted bitterly. Your instincts were screaming at you, and I made you feel crazy for listening to them. I couldn't deny that. It was true. For a long moment, we sat together in the wreckage of his marriage and my ransacked kitchen, two people who'd nearly lost each other to someone else's calculated cruelty. Then Michael did something he hadn't done since he was a child. He laid his head on my shoulder and sobbed. I held him the way I had when he was small, one hand stroking his hair, murmuring wordless comfort while he grieved for the life he thought he'd built. Outside, snow began to fall, soft, silent, covering the world in clean whiteness.
The police arrested Lisa 3 days later at a hotel near the Wyoming border. She'd been planning to disappear completely, but her photo had been circulated to every resort and travel agency within 200 miles. A sharp-eyed manager at a ski lodge recognized her, trying to use yet another stolen identity. I didn't attend the hearing, but Michael did, sitting grim-faced in the courtroom as prosecutors laid out the evidence. 5 years of systematic fraud, dozens of victims, hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen through identity theft and elaborate vacation scams. The Atlees case was part of it. So was mine, along with 17 others. When Lisa was let out in handcuffs, she looked directly at Michael with eyes full of tears and mouthed, "I'm sorry." He told me later that he felt nothing. Not anger, not grief, just emptiness where his love had been. "She was never real," he said quietly. "The woman I married never existed. I was in love with a character she played." We were sitting in my living room, cleaned now, restored, the broken picture frames replaced. Mary and Harold had helped me put everything back together, literally and metaphorically. "You'll heal," I promised him. "It takes time, but you will." He nodded, though his eyes remained distant and wounded. "I want to make things right with you, Mom. I know I can't undo the years I wasted believing her instead of you, but I want to try.
I reached over and took his hand. Then let's start with something simple. Let's start with truth. No more pretending things are fine when they're not. No more avoiding difficult conversations. Just honesty, even when it hurts. Deal, he said, managing a small, fragile smile. That evening, as twilight turned the snow outside lavender and gold, there was a knock on my door. Mary stood on my porch, holding a small USB drive, her weathered face creased with emotion. "I've been holding on to this for 3 years," she said quietly, pressing it into my palm. "After what happened with Lisa and our vacation, Harold secretly made backups of everything. Emails, confirmations, the whole mess. We didn't know what to do with it back then. But now," I looked down at the tiny piece of plastic and metal in my hand. Evidence. Proof. Vindication. The piece I hadn't even known was missing. "The police might need this," I said slowly. "It connects her pattern across multiple victims." Mary nodded. "That's why I'm giving it to you now. She hurt us. She hurt you. She hurt people we'll never even know about. This needs to stop with her, Aaron. No more victims." I hugged her tightly, breathing in her familiar scent of lavender soap and old memories. "Thank you," I whispered, "for speaking up, for saving this, for believing me." "We should have done it years ago," she said fiercely. "We let fear keep us silent, and it cost you dearly. Never again."
3 months later, I sat in a courtroom as Mary and Harold gave their testimony. Janie from the resort was there too, calm and professional as she explained the fraudulent phone calls. The prosecutor presented evidence from the USB drive, emails showing Lisa's systematic manipulation of the Atlees, using nearly identical tactics to what she'd employed against me. The pattern was undeniable, the evidence overwhelming. Lisa's defense crumbled. She was sentenced to 8 years for identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. Restitution was ordered for all victims. When the judge's gavel fell, I felt something release in my chest, a tension I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. Justice. Not perfect, not complete, but real.
Tears prickled my eyes at the mention of my husband. "He taught me to trust myself," I said quietly, "even when everyone else doubted." I forgot that for a while, but I remembered when it mattered most. Michael took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you for fighting, for not giving up, for being stronger than I gave you credit for." "Thank you for finally listening," I replied. We sat there together as the sun climbed higher, warming our faces, the sound of rushing water filling the comfortable silence between us. And for the first time in years, I felt something settle inside me, something that had been jagged and broken for so long I'd forgotten what wholeness felt like. Peace. Hard-won. Earned. Real. That Christmas, we started a new tradition. Michael and I, along with Harold and Mary, gathered at my house for a simple dinner. No fancy decorations, no elaborate performances, just good food, honest conversation, and the presence of people who'd stood by each other when everything fell apart. As we raised our glasses in a toast, I looked around my table, my son, my friends, my chosen family, and felt gratitude so profound it took my breath away. I'd lost a lot that year: a peaceful retirement, my sense of safety, years of relationship with my son, but I'd gained something infinitely more valuable: my voice, my dignity, my place at the table, and the unshakable knowledge that I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. Outside, snow began to fall gently, covering the world in quiet promise. A new beginning. Finally, completely mine.